Hello, everyone. Welcome to CRM MVP Podcast, episode number 105. If you have been listening to us from the beginning, if you have been listening to the show from the time it came out, well, congratulations to you because this is our fourth year episode, our fourth anniversary, I guess. And I wanted to, I was thinking about what we can talk about this time around. A lot of things that we have covered over the last 4 years have changed. And, I was just kind of like thinking about the things that when I started the show back in 2017, what are the things that I didn't expect to still be around 4 years later in 2021? And I got to say that one of the things that I didn't think was going to be around, one of the things that I was hoping wasn't going to be around is Dynamics CRM or 365 on-premise. I've been pretty vocal about this. I've been kind of upfront about the fact that I dislike the fact that Microsoft has an on-premise version of Dynamics 365, and I feel that we were going on that direction. I felt like we were going in that direction. If you think about the things that have happened over the last couple of years with the launching of the Power Platform and CDS, later renamed Dataverse, later renamed to CDS again, it seems like, none of that stuff is available on premise. The only thing you can get on premise is Dynamics CRM or Dynamics 365. And because of that, I thought, this is it. I thought CRM on-prem was going to go away. I don't have anything against CRM on-premise. I feel that for some companies out there, it makes sense, is the way to go. I've talked about it before. Projects that I've done that CRM on-prem was the best fit, especially when you have a large amount of data that you have to process and work with. I think that on-premise is more forgiving in terms of allowing you to store data if you really, really have to store a huge amount of data. And, online is not very flexible when it comes to the quotas and the capabilities that you get in terms of storage and in terms of API calls and in terms of other things. So I think that on-prem could be a fit for some company out there, some organizations out there. But for the vast majority, I would say 99.99% of companies out there leveraging a CRM product, in this case, Microsoft Dynamics, I think that online is the answer. And that answer is not just Dynamics 365 Online and their first-party apps like sales and customer service and field service and all of that. I think the answer these days is more likely to be the Power Platform or model-driven applications, your own solution. And the reason for that is not only you get the same benefits basically that you get with a first-party app in terms of storage and security and robustness and performance because they're all hosted in the same data centers, but you also get to pay way less in terms of licensing. I mean, we're talking about the fact that when it comes to the Power Platform, you can get a user licensed, no matter how many users you need, for $10 a month. $10. That is like 2 Starbucks coffees. Like, it's nothing, all right? $10 a month. And Microsoft continues to push the envelope when it comes to licensing with promotions like the one that they have going on until the end of June of 2021, where if you buy 200 licenses, you can get them as low as $3. $3 a month. Think about that. Think how inexpensive that is when it comes to the billions of dollars that Microsoft has spent building their data center network all over the world. That's nothing. And because of that, because the answer in these day and age, 99.99% of organizations, the answer will always be to go online. I thought that 4 years after we started the show, on-prem was going to be gone. And I really don't know what Microsoft is waiting for, to be honest, to pull the plug on this. I feel that every year at the MVP Summit, I ask the same question. When is on-premise going to go away? I feel that it murkies the water when it comes to organizations trying to make a decision and thinking about, and this it's not Microsoft's fault, but this happens a lot with CIOs out there and IT directors out there, CTOs out there that have to make a decision for their organization, and how some of these companies really, really believe, and I have no idea why this is a thing, but really, really believe that they can do a better job protecting their data than Microsoft and having their data stored in a data center. I don't understand it, honestly. And I don't mean to be condescending. I know that some of these CTOs and CIOs have done an amazing job setting up the infrastructure of their companies. They're really, really secure and safe. But, I mean, let's keep it real. We're talking about you having the skills, the resources, the money that a corporation like Microsoft has when they stand to make a profit from selling that safety, that infrastructure, and access to those resources to organizations out there. Like, there's just no competition. They are number one, like uncontested. So I don't understand how some of these companies, like I'm talking about, I've met prospects that they I don't know, they have like car dealerships and they're like, oh, we're better than Microsoft. Like, how's that? How can you believe that? Right? It's super interesting, but I don't know if Microsoft really has it in them to continue the CRM on-premise thing. I know that there are companies out there that might want it. I know that when it comes to profits and profit margins, CRM on-prem is a gold mine for Microsoft, because the software, the underlying software that makes up Dynamics, is not different between the online version and the on-premise version. Online, you're still hosted in SQL, which there's on-premise versions of SQL. Online, you're still relying on a server with services running in it, with IIS running on it. All of those things are available on-premise. So Microsoft, I think that this is honestly the main reason why on-premise is still alive. They look at it and they're like, but what's the incentive? Like, we still have to make the software to run it in our own servers and data centers. Why not just make it available to people to run it on theirs, even though they think it's better that they run it themselves? And it's 100% profit, right? Any money they make from licensing, they're not hosting it, supporting it, making backups of it, defending it against hackers, right? People that do ransomware and stuff. Like, they don't have to do any of those things for organizations out there hosting this thing themselves, and they get to keep 100% of those licenses, or the profit that comes from those licenses. Some of these licenses are way more expensive than going online, right? You're paying every year basically to have access to this functionality on premise that you have to host yourself. It's like the tip of the iceberg. In some cases with these on-premise implementations, it's like you only see the cost of the licensing, but there's a bunch of other costs below that you don't see, that organizations end up paying dearly for. And in a lot of cases, when you go on premise, you go into a contract, a multi-year contract with software assurance, where you can't get out of. It's not like a year later, you're like, you know what, this is costing a lot of money. We've been hacked twice. Maybe we should go online. If you go to Microsoft and say, look, can I just cancel my contract and go online? Microsoft will be like, no, that's just not going to happen. Sorry. You can reevaluate in a couple of years, but that's just not going to happen. Personally, at least that's been my experience with it. We've tried several times for multiple customers at this point that got into a long-term agreement with Microsoft, software assurance included, millions of dollars, and they said no, because the departments that deal with on-premise and online are different. People get compensated different ways. So there's not a whole lot of flexibility, honestly, at least based on my experience. Maybe there are some other partners out there that have more access than me. totally understand if that's the case. I'm just a very small, company when it comes to Dynamics partners out there. So I don't doubt that maybe some companies have better access than me to Microsoft and into promotions, but honestly, I haven't been able to do it for a single customer out there, and I wish I could, because I know I see a lot of companies and a lot of prospects and stuff that are on premise, they want to go online. There is just no option, right? Just let this play out, and when it comes time to renew, then maybe we can go online. There's no secret, though, that there are still a ton of on-premise customers out there, and I think that every year when you have a main conference like the CRMUG Summit, for example, you get kind of a rude awakening if you thought that the conference was going to be all about the latest and greatest and cloud technologies and why the Power Platform is so awesome. There will be plenty of sessions about that, but even within the programming committee, which I'm a part of, and I've been a part of it for I don't know how many years, the people that put together the sessions and the speakers and all of that for these events, and I've been part of that for Extreme 365, the previous conference called Extreme, and for CRMUG Summit. And even within the planning committee, there's people that use on-premise, and they want to see on-premise content during the conference. Because remember, the conference is about how can you get the most value out of what you have. And it's no secret that a lot of the customers that go, a lot of the people that attend the conference have on-premise. They have old school on-premise too. Like I've done my sessions about security or whatever it is, and I ask people to raise their hand if they have on-premise, and you get 40% of the room sometimes to raise their hand. And when I ask about what version, there's sometimes people in this day and age that still have CRM4. CRM4 that I don't want to work with CRM. Like if you come to me and you're like, Gus, here's money, help me with CRM4. And I started with CRM3, so I've worked with CRM4, before, and I worked with it for years on premise. And I think I would pass. I mean, we would have to be very, very close for me to go back and agree to help you when it comes to CRM4. But without a doubt, people will raise their hand, within the session. So it's unbelievable. And I was thinking about, why there's still CRM on-premise out there. Why, for some companies, it's so hard to convince them to think about making a move to online. And one of the things that I found myself saying more and more these days, and why I wanted to talk to you guys about this, is I don't know for how much longer Microsoft will have on-premise as an option. If you think about what we've seen over the last couple of years and how aggressive Microsoft has been when it comes to licensing for the Power Platform, $3 a month. Remember that, $3 per user per month. When you think about how aggressive Microsoft has been to eliminate reasons why companies don't want to go online, I think that it's only a matter of time until Microsoft decides to pull the plug altogether. I think that having on-premise out there stiffs innovation in a way. And Microsoft has made it clear that, for example, they are not creating any functionality for any version of Dynamics that is prior to 9.0. So if you're on-premise, which basically everyone is before 9.0, there's no improvements coming to you. Like zero. Doesn't matter how big, how much you love it. It's over. You have Dynamics CRM 8.2 or 365 8.2, whatever, CRM 2016. It's over for you. There is no new functionality coming. So I decided to do a little bit of research and kind of explain in this episode why I believe that on-premise days are counted. I will preface it by saying that I'm under NDA as an MVP, and if I knew something about this, like if Microsoft told us, by the way, we're pulling the plug of on-premise, I could not tell you. I could not record this episode. This would not exist if we knew this. So the fact that I'm talking about it on this episode is a major hint to you that this is all my own opinion and speculation at this point. I know zero about this. Because like I said, if I knew and I told you, then I will lose my MVP status, which I've had for 9 years, hopefully 10 coming up in July, and I don't want that to happen. So everything I'm going to talk about is my own opinion. This is not something Microsoft said, so I don't want you guys reaching out to Microsoft and be like, but Gus said that you said, there's no more on-premise. No, Microsoft hasn't said anything. Also, I wanted to mention that this episode is also being recorded on video. You can watch it on the CRM MVP YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to that, go ahead and do that. We share at least one video every week called 2-Minute Tuesdays, and sometimes we do more than one a week. But I will be sharing my screen throughout this episode. I will be showing you information on the Microsoft website. We're kind of playing detective a little bit on this episode, but I'm also going to read it in case you prefer to listen to this thing as a podcast, which most of you don't want to see my face, for a whole hour. And you want to listen through a podcast, you want to speed it up or whatever. Whatever the point is, if you want to listen to this, you can continue to do that. But if you want to see it with your own eyes, go to YouTube and check out episode number 105. So let's talk about something in Microsoft called fixed lifecycle policy. All right. So every single product that comes out through Dynamics 365 follows something that Microsoft call a fixed lifecycle policy. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. This is directly from docs.microsoft.com. It has been updated on April 21st of 2021, so this is brand new. This has been around for a long time, but again, it has been updated very recently. The fixed lifecycle policy basically dictates for how long Microsoft will support a specific product. And not every product follows the same timeline. But Dynamics has been following the same timeline for as long as I can remember. It's been a long time, right? So the fixed lifecycle policy has 3 components. One of them, it's called mainstream support. Mainstream support is what happens basically as soon as a product is released. If you have an issue, if you find a bug, Microsoft will support that. It's typically included in the price, right, of your agreement. If you're on-premise, if you're online, support has been included since online was released. So that's not new. So mainstream support is the first stage of Dynamics 365, Exchange, SharePoint, every product Microsoft releases. Now, again, this depends on the product that you're working with. Some products will have 2 years of mainstream support. Some products will have 1 year of mainstream support. Dynamics has 5, which is pretty awesome. So when it comes to mainstream support, Dynamics has been enjoying 5 years of that. And I'm going to read directly from the article. So I quote, mainstream support is the first phase of the product lifecycle. At the supported service pack level, mainstream support for products and services includes incident support, so tickets that you open, right? Security update support, and the ability to request non-security updates, meaning you found a bug, something is not working right, something is breaking Dynamics, you can request a patch or a fix, let's just say, a bug to be released. A service pack will come out or a patch will come out and it will fix that issue. All right. So that is mainstream support. After those 5 years go by, and again, I'm talking about this is the way Dynamics has been forever. After those 5 years go by, extended support kicks in. And extended support is basically paid support. Let's just think about it that way. So extended supports includes paid support, as I mentioned, security updates at no additional cost. So if there's something like that could potentially be a security breach, somebody hacking into Dynamics or whatever, they'll come in and fix it at no additional cost. However, you have the ability to select or request, rather not select, request non-security fixes for selected products. So some products will still, after 5 years of being released, will still release enhancements and patches and things that can fix issues basically within the software itself. Not every product. There's actually a link, to basically go and check out what products are available. But once again, extended support is what happens after mainstream support ends. So if you think about it, 5 years after a version has been released, extended support kicks in, and then you get support that way. Now, extended support basically applies to non-online customers, because if you're familiar with online, you get an update every 6 months. So it's not like you can be on the same version for 5 years, like unless Microsoft decides to stop releasing new versions, which is not happening. So every time a new version comes out, that mainstream support gets punted. Basically, it gets hit again, and here we go, and you get 5 more years, and 5 more years, and 5 more years. You never run out of mainstream support, which is great. You always get bug fixes, you always get security fixes, you always get new features, you always get free support. You're online, and boom, 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 it just keeps happening. It's awesome. Extended support kicks in for on-premise customers. Now think about that. 5 years after the software has been released, that's when extended support kicks in. Okay? Now, there are some things that are available via extended support. Some things are not available, like I said, depending on the product that you're in. But one thing that happens during extended support, once a product goes into extended support, is that there is no more product design and feature releases. They will not release any new functionality for old versions. This has been a constant of it. So think about CRM 2011. Let's just think about CRM 2011. By CRM 2016, or by the year 2016, so 5 years after 2011 was released, and I think 2011 was released in 2010, actually, and we will check out later when it was released. But 5 years after it was released, we already had CRM 2013 and 2015, maybe even 2016 by that point, which means that they're not, coming up with enhancements for CRM 2011 anymore when they already have 2013, 2015 out, right? So this makes sense. 5 years after it has been released, forget about enhancements. We'll maybe be able to fix bugs if, nobody has found them 5 years later. Maybe we'll fix that, but no enhancements. After extended support, right? What happens beyond the end of support? Well, basically, depending on who you are, Microsoft calls this, again, depending on the customer, you may or may not have extended security updates. So like 7 years after a version was released, you find that there is some backdoor or something that somebody can exploit. Most likely Microsoft will fix it, but they don't guarantee it. This program is called Extended Security Update Program. So depending on how important it is or how devastating it could be or whatever, Microsoft will jump on that and fix it. Now, this is like if you found some security backdoor, kind of vulnerability on CRM 2011 at this point, or maybe 2013 at this point. I mean, we've had so many versions of Dynamics released since then that imagine Microsoft stopping what they're doing right now with the Power Platform and all of that to go back and fix some vulnerability in 2013. What are the chances of that happening? I'm not sure. Non-security updates, forget it. Before we had kind of like maybe depending on what you're requesting, maybe depending on the bug, maybe depending on what you're doing, we might release some kind of patch to fix that issue, that bug that you found or whatever. Beyond extended support, so 10 years after, forget it. Is not happening. You found a bug 10 years later. First of all, why are you still using that version of Dynamics? I think that would be the question. And second, no, we're not fixing that. All right. So it's just not available anymore after 10 years. Can you pay for support? Yes. Actually, you can pay Microsoft as an on-premise customer for support, and a lot of partners will support it as well. The problem is that support is not guaranteed, because imagine you have an issue and the only way to fix that issue is to come up with a non-security update. Well, you're out of luck. Sorry, you had an issue. It's over. It's like if you're 60 and your shoulder starts hurting, that's it. Your shoulder just hurts until you die. It's over. They're not gonna fix it anymore. That's kind of how this works. So we've had those 3 cycles of support forever. I actually went back into this thing called the Product and Services Lifecycle Information website, which is not easy to find, but I was able to find it. And I went back on the results and searched, all the way to CRM 2011, because I really wanted to check those dates, when it was released, when that mainstream support ended, when that extended support ended. I wanted to check all those things. And by the way, before I show you what that looks like, or before I talk about it, if you're listening to this, the other thing that I searched for is I went to Google and I searched for CRM on-premise. I just typed in CRM on-premise. You can do this too. Test it. CRM on-premise. 0 results from Dynamics 365 on-premise on page 1 of Google. 0, right? Which, as you know, if you're not on the first page of results on Google, you might as well don't exist, right? So the first ever result that I found of Dynamics CRM on-premise, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for those of you watching on YouTube, was on page 2. And it's actually an article on docs.microsoft.com titled Dynamics CRM On-Prems to Dynamics 365 Online Migration. So the first result that I found on Google from Microsoft, there's a bunch of other results about other stuff. The one I found from Microsoft, the first one was how to go to the cloud. So what do you think about that? Right? 0 results on the first page, 1 result on the second page, and it's an article teaching you how to move to the cloud. I mean, if that to me is telling me what the priorities are, which is, remember, I'm on the anti-on-prem camp, right? I'll work with on-prem, if you need help, but I'm not looking at it for new implementations unless it's a very, very rare scenario that, on-premise will be a better fit for it. So anyway, I went to the Product and Services Lifecycle Information page and check this out. When you go to CRM 2011, we can see right here that Dynamics 365 2011 was released on May 18th, 2011, which is almost 10 years ago. It's actually 10 years, and I guess it's going to be 10 years in 2 days from when this episode was released. The mainstream support for CRM 2011 ended, you guessed it, 5 years later on July 12th, 2016. And the extended support kicked in at that point and ended on July 13th, so 5 years and 1 day after the fact, 2021. It actually hasn't ended. Well, depending on when you're listening to this episode. But if you're listening to it when it dropped, first of all, thank you for doing that. But if you're on 2011, believe it or not, it's still, at least for, 2 more months, almost, it's still within the extended end date or the extended support end date, which means you find a bug related to security, they'll fix it. I cannot believe that there's a team of developers on Microsoft kind of able and willing and available to be able to release a patch to CRM 2011 right now. But again, if you're using 2011, you're probably a massive corporation out there. And of course, if you found something that can have devastating consequences, somebody getting into your database or whatever, ransomware attack or something, Microsoft will probably fix that for you, at least until July 13th, 2021. Let's look at CRM 2013. CRM 2013 was actually released in 2014. I don't even remember this, by the way, until I looked at the lifecycle support website from Microsoft. I was like, it was 2014. So start date, January 12th, 2014. I actually think I kind of remember that it was set to be released in October, and then something delayed it, and they ended up releasing in January of 2014. I feel like that's what happened. If you have any recollection of what happened, if you can go back 8 years ago or 7.5 years ago and remember what happened, go ahead and drop me a comment, because I'm curious. I feel like I remember that this was supposed to be released actually in September of 2013, and then something happened. There was an issue or whatever, and they couldn't release it until January. So anyway, January of 2014 rolls in with mainstream support. It ended, you guessed it, 5 years later on January 8th, 2019. Actually, 4 days before the 5 years, but fine. Nobody was watching. Nobody complained. And then exactly 5 years and 1 day later, extended support ended, or it's set to end on January 9th of 2024. So for CRM 2013, we are right now 2 years into extended support, and we have 3 more years, well, less than 3 years at this point, all the way to January 9th of 2024. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, again, if you're seeing my screen, you notice that a service pack was released later on that year in 2014, which bumped the I guess the release date or the start date of mainstream for that, and it didn't really change the end date of the extended support date. So even though it was a new release, Microsoft said we're holding still on the extended support end date. Once again, that is January 9th of 2024. Then 2015 came along, CRM 2015. It was released February 11th of 2015, which is great because it's CRM 2015. And the mainstream support started at that point. You guessed it, 5 years later, January 14th. Actually, it was more like 4 years and 11 months later of 2020. Mainstream support ended for CRM 2015, and it's currently on extended support all the way to January 14th, 2025. So no more 1 year and 1 day, or 5 years and 1 day, the way they had been doing it before. But you're still in good shape, right? You just lost it a year ago, or a little bit over a year ago, mainstream support. Now you're paying for extended, and you can continue to pay for that up until January 14th of 2025, which is great. CRM 2016 came along. Somehow it was released the same year, November 30th of 2015. I don't remember this either. I feel like it was released in 2016, but once again, this was 5 years ago. I feel like 5 years ago was 50 years ago. It's been a long time, but anyway, 2016 came out. It went into mainstream support, ending on January 12th of 2021. And then after that, which ended again earlier this year on January 12th of 2021, extended support kicked in, and you guessed it, 5 years and 1 day later, January 13th of 2026, the extended support is set to expire for CRM 2016. And again, that was bumped out from even the latest service pack for 2016, which was 8.2. It was released on, it's hard to believe, I feel like it was earlier, or I guess closer to this date. I don't know. But it's saying December 16th, 2016. So about a year later, version 8.2 was released, which is what most people are in, by the way, that have CRM 2016 or CRM on-premise. Most people are on version 8.2. Well, that one, once again, your mainstream support ended in January of this year, and your extended support is set to end 5 years later on January 13th, 2026. Now, here's the interesting piece. This is when it gets interesting. This is when we're playing detective. Let's look at 9.0. Dynamics 365 9.0.2 on-premise. This version was released on October 31st, 2018, and it went into mainstream support. Mainstream support ends, well, like we're used to, about 5 years and a month or so later, January 9th, 2024. They really like these January dates. So once again, mainstream will end for version 9.0.2, the latest on-premise version out there that you can have. It will end on January 9th of 2024. So you still have a few years for mainstream support, and that's great. But here's where it gets interesting. The extended support will not end on January 10th or January 9th of 2029. It's not going to go for 5 years. Right now, the set extended support end date, it's only 2 years later, January 13th, 2026. So if you think about it, it's the same day that CRM 2016 or the 8.2 version, which they are not creating any new functionality for, is set to expire. The same day, even though they were released 3 years apart, Microsoft is saying, well, whether you have the previous version, the 8.2 version, or you have the latest version, 9.0.2 version, we'll stop creating any bugs, any functionality, any fixes, anything by January 13th, 2026. So what does this mean? I don't know. I mean, you tell me. Why, since 2011, we have been enjoying these 10-year periods of a version being released, 5 years of mainstream support, then 5 years of extended support. 10 full years. In some cases, give or take a month or a few days or whatever, but it's 10 years overall. But yet, the Dynamics 365 version 9 only has 8 years instead of 10, right? You get the 5 for the mainstream support and then only 2 of extended support. I don't know. Like I said, I keep telling prospects and customers when I talk to organizations out there that are hesitant to migrate from on-premise to online, I keep telling them that right now, you have the power, right? You have the ability to schedule this thing, to budget for it, to prepare your team for it, massage your data. So when you migrate it from on-premise to the cloud, you get to take the data that you really need. You get to really put all of those best practices in place and complete a migration successfully without being in a rush. But what happens if Microsoft announces that maybe they're coming up with a new version of on-premise or not? They're not coming up with a new version of on-premise, but they announce that whatever version is out there right now or whatever version is coming up will be the last. That's it. We're going to not opt in for the fixed lifecycle policy that they've been enjoying so far, those 10 years that we've been working with since, version 2011 at least, just going back. And they've decided they've had it. They want to focus online. That is where they win. Now what? Now, if you're an on-premise customer, that means that you and everyone else who's on-premise are going to have to scramble and figure out how to get away from on-prem and into an online system. And I get it that some companies will see this as kind of a challenge and be like, well, if I need to go online, now I'm going to look at Salesforce or Soho or whatever, right? I'm not going to even look at online, which I think it would be insane given the fact that you can pay $3 a month per user per month. But let's say that you're like, just because they're forcing me, I'm going to go online. That's still a project. That's still something you have to budget, prepare for, make the move. I mean, that still has to happen. Whether you go the Microsoft route or the Salesforce route or whatever route you go to, you still have to do it because you'll be forced out, right? Now, some people might say, Well, how can they force me out if I have this thing installed in my server on premise? Well, they will not support you, right? Although some partners out there might charge an arm and a leg to support you, but they won't be able to create bug fixes and stuff. Like I said, some of the problems you are going to run into are unsupportable, right? Whether you pay or not, doesn't matter. You will still won't be able to fix it. Number one. Number two, they might say they're not selling any more licenses for on-premise. So if you, in defiance, decide to stay on-premise, which, by the way, stopped perpetual licenses a couple of versions ago, which is something you used to get. Like if you were in CRM 2015 or something, you could buy a perpetual license. And if you had a perpetual license, then you would win. You would say, you know what? I'm going to stay on-premise forever. Even though you don't support me, extended support ended, if I have an issue, you won't help me, I'm going to stay on-premise. Okay, you win. You can stay on-prem on CRM 2015 if you have perpetual licenses. Now, hopefully you won't have to hire anybody else because you can't buy those anymore. So you can't really go and be like, oh, I just acquired this company. Can you give me 100 new perpetual CRM 2015 licenses? Nope. You're not going to get that. And, you know, and if you are on the latest versions where they had no perpetual licenses, where you had to like pay for them every year, Microsoft might be like, you know, that contract that we have that guarantee you 2 years or 3 years or whatever, when that one ends, we will not renew it. It's over. On-premise licensing, it's over. So what are you going to do now? Are you going to continue to run on-premise without paying Microsoft and see what happens? Hope for the best? I mean, maybe Microsoft at that point will have their dual use right policy where, you know, you're basically able to pay for online and use on-prem, but you won't be able to pay for the Power Platform because that doesn't exist on-prem. So you're going to be kind of stuck. You're going to be having to pay full price for online and using an on-prem version. It's just, they will make it so it doesn't make any sense to stay on-prem. And you will also realize that it doesn't make any sense to stay on-prem. And also every single on-prem customer will realize that it doesn't make any sense to stay on-prem. And everyone will want to migrate, like I said, to the cloud with Microsoft, which makes sense because it's inexpensive, or to a competitor. But how many partners and professionals are out there that you think that are going to be able to deal with every company out there that is still on-prem trying to move to online? How many of those do you think are out there? And how much are they going to charge you to do that when they're pressed against the clock to deliver, you know, an implementation online? They can take a long time because remember, not all of the functionality they're going to have on premise is going to actually work online. Some of it will have to be recreated, rewritten, get rid of altogether. I mean, you will have some of these migrations last years, literally 2, 3, 4 years to go from on-prem to online for the most complex implementations out there. And now we're in 2021, and again, based on our detective work, it sounds like 2026 is kind of a line in the sand type of situation. How long do you think you can wait before you start considering this seriously, making a move to the cloud? I guess that's the question, right? That's the question I'm putting out for you out there. And I wonder also how professionals feel about it. I mean, I know that every time I've been outspoken about whether Dynamics on-premise should exist or not, I get MVPs and other professionals telling me that you can't get rid of on-premise. Like, you can't do it. It's a competitive advantage for Microsoft. It's basically a mint. They're printing money with this thing. You can't really do it. I don't know if that's going to be the case. And I don't know if that's going to be up to us in the future, you know, whether to make that decision or not. So that's what I wanted to discuss in this episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for, you know, tuning in over the last 4 years. I really, really enjoy getting to get on the microphone and talk to you guys about kind of the things that I've been thinking about when it comes to Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. You know, it's interesting because a lot of the things that I learn out there come from implementations and dealing with customers and all these challenges. And, this is one of those things that I keep running into. Companies that are on premise, that are, on the verge of like renewing their contract again. And they say, well, Gus, Microsoft is coming to me saying that they can do another 3-year software assurance contract. Should I do it or not? The answer is almost always don't do it, because you go into one of these contracts, you're on premise for 3 years. 3 years from now is 2024. At that point, you're going to have to renew or go online. And what if Microsoft says we're not going to renew it because there's no more online? Now you're going to be forced to do it, and you can't get out of it to use that money to go online. So if you or the company you work for, or if you're a professional, any of your customers are on premise and they have, their software assurance agreement coming to an end, they're thinking about upgrading from 8.2 to 9.0 or whatever and stay on premise, I implore you to please consider making the move to the cloud as soon as possible, right? There's no more time to waste here. If you're in a company using on-premise, this might not be up to you next time around. So take the opportunity to upgrade and take the opportunity to partner up with someone that can help you get there and make the transition, as smooth as possible. Thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple of weeks with yet another interesting episode. Once again, if I'm hosting the episode, I'm not always hosting them. This is a show for all MVPs to come in and share, their secrets and their tricks and tips that they've learned along the way. But if I'm hosting the episode, I'm going to try to record each one of them. So in case you want to see it, I do think that there's some value in sharing the screen once in a while and, go through things together. Please go ahead and tune in on YouTube. Like I said, go to YouTube, search for CRM MVP, and you will find my channel. If you want a direct connection, crmmvpmedia.com. crmmvpmedia.com will drop you right into our YouTube channel. Everything 100% free, of course. Not trying to sell anything. On YouTube, there's no merch or anything like that. All I want is to, make this personal connection with you guys, talk about what I care and what I get to work with every day, and something that I'm very passionate about. And hope that you guys are enjoying this. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below on the video if you're watching these on YouTube, or you can send me an email at info@crmmvppodcast.com. Happy to answer any questions, happy to take requests. And as always, we'll see you in a couple weeks.